emotional safety. So I think this is like part four. I don't know if I should just start calling these individual things because the level that I can go into when it comes to emotional safety is probably bottomless, I would say. Um, I personally, I think everything comes down to emotion, and therefore emotional safety is paramount. And I think where this can get really interesting, and I've said something like this before, but I want to go further with it. I think it's the reason why I like astrology so much, and the reason why I see its importance, is to my knowledge, there is nothing that comes close to describing to the detail, other than human design, what a person's actually like. And in terms of, I think sometimes the issue that our society does, and I can understand why, putting people into these kind of malformed, strict ideas of, this is what a woman is, this is what a man is. And we're just more complex than that. We just are. And so, yes, I understand there's a whole bunch of us, and we all have to learn how to, live in this society. And, obviously there's rules for a reason and all that. And I don't dispute those things are important. I think some of the rules are kind of stupid, but that's just my opinion. But I think that overall, there's a bunch of us, and we all have to understand there are certain guidelines that we need to adhere to. But then there's some that need to be and that aren't in place. So that's interesting. And I think that that framework is starting to show in terms of what's going on in the media these days, what has been going on for quite a while. It's obvious that some of these situations are not ideal for the victims at all. So, and I want to bring up the idea of the boys club. This is something I think has been going on for a very long time, and for a long time it was protected. And it protected the boys club in it, not the people who were affected or the victims, right? And so we're starting to see that now. So this is an interesting part, and I think what I want to sort of say, and I don't know if I talked about this, I might have to go back and look through the videos and just be sure, but look, I personally think religion and the rules that go with religion are some of the biggest problems. And I don't just mean the whole believing in a higher power, working towards being a better human being. Like, obviously that stuff is going to be good. I'm not talking about that. That's definitely not the part of religion that I think causes the problems. And I don't even think it's so much religion as itself. It's the fact that human beings created this construct to then make it somehow okay to oppress or take advantage of, and then have it somehow be the other way, look the other way, like it's okay. And the reason I'm saying it and framing it like that, I think the biggest issue with religion is the sexual shame. So in terms of this emotional safety thing that I'm talking about, the reason why I think this is one of the biggest issues of our society, because our society is governed by religion, especially, Christianity in the Western world, but there's also some not so good parts of like the Quran, or, sort of being Muslim and whatever. There's a whole bunch of these constructs, and like I said, at the basis of it, and I'll go through this in a minute, but I want to spend some time here first, is this idea that sex is somehow evil, wrong, and I don't know, and sexual desire is whatever. Pretty much you can base every single victim, male or female, child or whatever, you can every single person of SA, you can pretty much link it back to the basis of our beliefs around sex and sexual desire is that it's evil and wrong and a shameful thing. You can't go about it like that, and the reason you can't is because by shaming sex, it doesn't make the desires go away. In fact, it makes it worse. And you don't learn then. This is the thing. I don't think men are able to then learn how to control, or should I even say, direct their sexual desires. And look, the reason why I say for men is it's more dangerous. It's more dangerous for everybody if men don't learn how to direct their sexual desires. If they see it as this evil thing, what ends up happening is it creates like a distortion, a split. And the sexual desires become a lot darker, more taboo. And they kind of go in this little hidden shame cupboard in the shadow. And I know that on me just explaining that doesn't seem like that's such a big deal, but when you really rip open the surface, it's pretty dark. And so what happens then is this sort of, the desires kind of funnel into this darker, nastier, whatever, and they sort of go, well, I'm evil and dark and wrong for having these desires, but I still want them. So I'll just hide it. I'll just look for the most sort of whatever disgusting things I can find, and sort of, it almost forces them into viewing themselves and the object of their desire as an object. And what it does is it takes the emotional connection out of it. And when you look at studies to do with porn and adult content in general, that's exactly what it does. And so it makes sense if your basis is that you start first by teaching everyone, but with males it's more dangerous because they're physically so strong, right? If you teach young males that what their desires are evil and wrong and disgusting and all the rest of it, they start really early because those desires kick in, like it's getting to be like 8, 9, 10 years old. These these boys are getting addicted to porn, right? Because they have these urges and there's no safe area to explore them. And so that funnels then, before they're even ready for all of this, really, it funnels into these weird whatever, and then again it starts to play tricks on the brain and the dopamine centers and all the rest of it. And then it doesn't create a pathway for emotional connection to themselves or to anyone else. It forms this kind of weird, perverted, disconnected, kink, dopamine-driven disconnection. And it's no wonder that relationships and whatever are becoming a bit of a problem. So the other thing that does then, it funnels into men then attack children, male and female. And then again, either with the males, they often they end up doing the same thing, or they become a predator, or they, whatever, because it was done to them as little boys. With the females, it tends to be they run into making adult content of some description, or they just completely shut off from the idea altogether. And intimacy, the whole thing is just too much. Depends on the person. It depends on what happened to them. Depends on how they interpreted what happened. Depends on how much support was given. Depends on a lot of things. And that's why it's individual. That's why all these cases that are coming out, and people are like, oh, well, why didn't the victims come forward? Again, you're not going to come forward if you have shame around it. If you have shame around sex, if you have shame around what happened to you, if you don't have a healthy support system, and you know what I mean? So that's why a lot of people don't come forward. Sometimes it's the awareness of, even if I come forward, this person's probably not going to get, it's not going to stop anything. And in a lot of cases it doesn't, because we've been living in a boys' club to protect the initial problem, which is the belief by so many people that sex is evil, sexual desire is a sin. So that's why I say that's what it comes down to at its basis. This is where the biggest problem is when it comes to intimacy, sex, relationships, interconnection, all the rest of it. If your baseline belief, whether you directly are aware of it or not, is that sex is a sin and the desires around it are a sin, to me it's no wonder that we have this system, as messed up as it is, happening all over the world from a global point of view. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. It's A plus B, you know what I mean? Like it's a continuous, you can see the journey. If you look at it, you can see it. So the basis would be we have to go back to basics and disconnect from this idea. Number one, a lot of what religion teaches is wrong and toxic and evil in terms of helping human beings become who they're supposed to be. And it also detaches you from your emotional side. And this is a problem because, yes, we are a physical being, don't get me wrong, but we're not just that. Everything physical has a non-physical component when it comes to the human being or when it comes to the animal. Everything pretty much, even when you think they're not sentient, but like trees and mushrooms, for instance, they have an entire system that happens in the root system. There's an entire electrical, energetic field in the ground with the soil and the microbiome and stuff in the soil for plants. So it proves there's always, when it comes to energy and to life, there's a physical and non-physical component. And so that's also the case with sex. There is a physical component, but there's an emotional component. And the problem with most people, if you think sex is a sin, you're only going to focus on getting those physical needs met rather than connection. And the truth is, if you don't focus or you don't look at the value to even know about the idea of emotional connection when it comes to sex, there's no point to doing it. And that's why people are constantly, I need more, because these adult content, whatever, there's no connection. And that's the very thing you're looking for. That's the very thing everybody's looking for when it comes to sex. Connection and emotional connection are different to different people. Again, you can see that in astrology. You can look at a person's areas that have to do with dating and attraction and sex and all the rest of it, and you can see how that individual person is going to view it and their needs related to it. So you can see all of that. Well, I can. But that's why it's important, because if you aren't able to zone into that and you're using adult content, you're always going to be objectifying yourself and objectifying the content. Therefore, there is no connection, and it will always leave you empty, and you will always be sitting in shame, and you'll be disconnected in your relationships from the emotional component of connecting to your partner and the physical component. So again, in terms of the emotional safety point of view, what that does for men is it makes the idea of connecting from an emotional point of view, especially if you've been actively not learning to connect emotionally because you've been watching adult content since you were a 10-year-old boy or whatever. That's too scary. You wouldn't even know where to begin with that. The concept of connection, like it wouldn't even. And the other problem is it often, for males, they use it as a way of not dealing with their problem. So whatever the problem is, whether that's an issue at work or, they've had trouble with their partner, they've had troubles with their friends, their family, whatever the situation is, they do that and then remove it. And then they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to think about it until it happens again, because it will. So it ends up becoming this way of not dealing with your problems. And that's why they struggle when, if they have a female partner telling them there's a problem and they need to fix it. Because their whole thing that they do is they just jerk and release and then repress and then not deal with it and whatever. And so they just want to do that again because that's all they know how to do. And then they want the woman to just shut up. That's why a lot of times they say things like, stop nagging and complaining all the time. And, because they have never ever dealt with their problems, actually dealt with it. They just sort of use that as a way, which is interesting because that doesn't work for women. Our brains just work differently. So it's really interesting that that's what happens. And so it's obvious to me that in order for men to feel emotionally safe, they need to, as boys, learn better coping skills at dealing with the challenges of life. And I think it's a different approach because they've got a different brain than women. It's a different approach to help them do that. I think in a lot of cases it has to go back to basics. And I don't mean that they're stupid or something. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying it's a different approach. It has to be approached a little bit more gently. And earlier too, I might add. None of this, oh, suck it up, be a man, because that's the thing. If you do that to your son, whether you're a male or a female, mother, father, you're teaching your son to suppress by doing that. That's what you're doing. And a lot of people think this whole thing of, oh, just dust it off, you'll be fine. That's teaching children to suppress their emotions. And therefore, it goes, and from when a boy is just a little boy playing with his cars and his trucks and whatever, it goes from that to when his testosterone kicks in and he starts becoming sexual. Now he goes from his cars and his toys to porn. So it's from one repressed, suppressing your emotions thing to the next. And then you don't learn how to deal with it. And this is what I think happens. And so at that point, that no matter how old that male gets, unless he learns to face the lifetime, sometimes, of these challenges, he's still that little boy who inside, okay, on the outside he might be a full-grown man, but on the inside, he's still that little boy who hasn't faced any of his issues. And so that part of him has never grown up. So how can he have a relationship? How can he have a job? How can he function in life and in society or do anything that needs to be done when he has no idea how to deal with problems and his emotions? And the truth is, yes, women need safety in this area too, don't get me wrong, but it's obvious we need less. And again, I can't be 100% sure if this is just society or if this is just women's resilience in this particular area. I can't be 100% sure on that. I'd have to look at more studies, but I do know that the female brain is more complex. Its thoughts are more complex, and its direction is more geared toward recognizing risk and trying to fix those risks. So I actually think women are more solutions based. Again, it depends on how you look at it. When it comes to like fixing physical things, I think men tend to be better at thinking about finding solutions because they're a bit more, that area is a bit easier for them, where I think when it comes to emotional and mental type stuff, solutions need to be found, I think that's more women's domain. We just find that easier. It's just differences. And I think it comes to a point where we have to see this about each other. And again, I don't mean that this is definitely the be and end all. There would be men, right? If you were to put a man and a woman next to each other, there will definitely be men in the world where that particular man understands emotions better than the woman. But I'm just saying, on average, that's typically what happens from a biological survival mechanism. Women tend to be more geared toward risk assessment. So we tend to see the problems before they're a serious problem by looking at patterns and whatever. Again, it's hypervigilance and survival mechanisms. It's all this kind of stuff, but it's just how we are. So it becomes obvious that this idea around forcing males as little boys to suppress their emotions, this is a serious problem. It's a serious problem. So I strongly recommend, if you're a person watching this and you're either considering having children one day or you already have them, my advice is, whether you're male or female, do not tell your boys to suck it up or to deal with it or to act like a man or any of this garbage, because the reality is females and males are emotional beings. We all are. And so if we don't learn how to deal with our emotions in a healthy way, and we don't learn how to navigate them, like I said, there might be specific ways. I think personally males need a bit more support in this area, and they need more help understanding and a safe space to do that. And like I said, with women, I think we just tend to figure it out, but it would be better if we were supported a bit more as well. So it's obvious across the board, we need to support our, male and female sort of children, how to actually understand, accept, and be comfortable with their emotions. Because the fact is, and I strongly believe this, if you don't have a strong emotional foundation, your logic goes out the window, your capacity to handle struggles and issues, obstacles, pain, whatever, out the window. Your ability to think clearly and logically and use cognition. Everything is governed by where you're sitting in your emotional state. And so if that's a mess, if you can't deal with it and you can't handle and you suppress and all these, everything else in your life is going to go downhill from there, including your relationships. So this is very, very serious. I think there are definitely other areas that will contribute in terms of emotional safety. But I genuinely believe if we do not start teaching the youth of today for tomorrow at regulating their emotions, understanding them, and making it okay for both male and female, this sort of crap is going to continue. We will continue to see men do not feel safe emotionally and mentally, that deep down inside they're actually damaged little boys who never grew up and don't have the support and all the rest of it. And we will continue to see these things. So we have to stop putting all of the responsibility on males in terms of they're the ones who are supposed to lead. They're the ones who are supposed to suck it up and deal with all their issues by suppressing them and then being okay. All that stuff has to stop. We have to understand that men are still human beings. They still have emotions and they need help figuring out how to deal with them. If we don't want to raise weak inside, strong outside little boys growing into adult males, which is very a dangerous combination, I have to tell you. This is dangerous. The most dangerous men in the world inside are damaged little boys and outside in these big, strong physical bodies. These are the ones who become the ones who attack children and attack adults. Women in particular. This is what happens. So we need to take this seriously. And I know this often falls on women's shoulders. And look, when it comes to mental and emotional, we are stronger. We have a better handle on this, and this is our domain. So it's obvious in this time we're moving into more of a matriarchy. We're moving more into a more feminine era. We need to take control of this situation, and we need to help. Again, sometimes it might be too difficult or too far gone for some full-grown males. But we can do this for the boys of tomorrow, right? We can. So, my advice is to first start with, don't tell them to suck it up. If you notice a little boy crying, if it's your little boy or otherwise, ask him if he's okay. Ask the mother if, whatever the situation might be, but especially if you just want to do it with you, if you've got a son. Check and see how that boy is feeling. Ask him. And then don't shut him down when he tells you. It's okay for him to feel. He's human at the end of the day. We're human beings and we need to stop shutting off each other's empathy because it causes serious problems in the long run. It's like having shame around sex. If you shut down this idea of not feeling, you're going to turn into an object, a robot, but those emotions don't just go away. They're still going to show up and it's still going to cause problems in your life. So I think I think I'll go deeper into that for the next video because this one's quite long. But I think this is definitely something to consider and take more seriously.